All right, so this is preparing live stream. Good afternoon and good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Washington Outsider and our series on human rights. With us today to discuss the most recent developments in the situation for women in Afghanistan are Lailuma Sajid, a journalist who also works with the refugees in the NDOE organization in Brussels, Dr. Manal Musalmi, who is the international advisor on the MENA region for the European Parliament and also a human rights defender, and Medina Hamidi, a model and a human rights activist, also original from Afghanistan and now residing in Belgium. I am going to give each of the speakers time to introduce themselves, their involvement in activism related to the specific situation in Afghanistan, and give their observation on the most recent developments for women under the Taliban since it came to power at the end of the summer. And following that, we'll launch a roundtable style discussion, and we'll start with Lailuma Sajid.
Thank you very much. Thanks for inviting and give the chance to introduce and raise at least the voice of Afghan women and the youngest that they are already in Afghanistan. They are fighting for their rights. So as you mentioned it, my name is Lailuma Sajid. I'm a journalist working with the Brussels Morning newspaper and also working with the NADU, the diaspora network for the Afghan in Europe, and also, as you mentioned it, with the UNHCR for the refugees. Let's say short story of mine, because this is the second time that we are facing the same problem, let's say, and challenge the Taliban take power in Afghanistan. In 1996, when the Taliban took power in Afghanistan, the situation was really more or less the same. It was so hard and difficult to let's say, live your dream and stay and stuck as a prisoner at home, and you are not allowed to do any kind of activities that you would like to do. So as a young woman, and as a student at the journalism university, then they stopped every activities for everyone. I mean, for the women. There is no way to go out without any man from your home. And also there is no chance for women to go in the school and also for work. So the situation was really so tough, and it's exactly like that. We suffered a lot, and on that time, there wasn't too many countries. They are not supporting for women, only few international organizations. They are coming and they said for the humanitarian support. On that time, it was really tough situation. Stay at home, always it's not easy and boring. So I start a secret class for the kids, for the girls, to show them their way. And this is the subject that I always fight for that. And I said, women also must visible in the country. And I start by teaching the girls at home. After a few months, really, it wasn't so easy on that time. They closed all the schools. But to create a secret class for the girls at home, it wasn't easy, with a lot of risk. And then I said, come on, if we are not taking the risk, then it's not easy to do something that you want. And after a few months, or maybe, the Taliban came and they are punishing me. Not only one time, it's 2 times they are punishing me because I teach the girls. I think for them it's a crime, but if you think in the reality to teach, to show someone in the good way, it's not a crime. So it was so hard and difficult. I never forget the moment that they came and they beating me, they whipped me. it was really very hard and difficult moment, and there wasn't any choice. And in the second time when they came and they said, if you continue like that, then it will be the end. On that time, I feel that it's something so different and difficult, I must stop. And finally, I decide with my mother and my sisters, they said, if you're not stopping, then they will kill us, all of us. And I stopped, and I never forget that, the moment that with which kind of aggressive they are coming, they are trying to punishing. And believe me, every time since they took power in the second time, if it's coming in my mind, my body is like a shaking. And I said, I can't believe that after 20 years, the same situation, women are facing the same. So different ways try to work, and then no way to stop. And after 11th of September, the ways changed, like the regime was changing in Afghanistan, and we moved to Kabul, start my last year at the university and finishing the university. Before finishing my university, I'm sure that at the journalism university, we are only 4 women, I think, a student on that university. And I was the first that take off my burqa, and I said that I don't want anymore, because we are fed up with the hard and difficult situation of the Taliban. It wasn't easy. It was 2002, and the people are really not like say that the same mentality more or less, that they're not easy. And I start my combat and my fight for the woman right. And then I said, okay, we are stay strong to do something for everyone, especially for the woman. And then when I start working at as a journalist with the international organization, they call that IWPR, Institute for Peace and War Reporting, the basis in London. And not easy. We are only 3 women or 4 women journalists and working. It was so difficult ways that no one is even supporting us. I mean, from outside, they say that this is a work or job for mostly for a man. And I said, if we divide the job for man and woman, then as they mentioned it always, the man is going to work and then we stay at home. And then I said, no, we are trying to do so with many difficulties, start working and appearing without any scarf in the TVs. It wasn't so easy. It starts like said for everyone, if we are not starting for our right and not fighting now, then tomorrow will be late. The things that it's like an experience when the second time the Taliban took power, I said for the girls, if you stay quiet at home today, then you stay and silent forever till the moment the regime is changed. And the time that is start fighting, working to receive something, it's not easy in the country with the religious, with the hard and the difficulties that to convince everyone that this is our right and fighting for that, for a woman right, for a peace, for security, for democracy, for freedom of expression and all these kind of things. It wasn't easy, but we start and we said, if we are not doing that, then tomorrow will be late. So the time that passing for all these difficulties, we are hoping for a good future, for a better future. 20 years is not like a short time. It was really long time. We are fighting with a lot of things and we achieved many good things. As a woman, I was so happy during this 20 years. Really, there is a lot of achievement for a woman. But at the end, after 20 years, spending thousands of billions of dollars and thousands of international, let's say, troops were killed in Afghanistan, injured, and a lot of really not easy to manage everything and this kind of achievements. So to arrive at the end, and when you see there is like a dream, everything passed, like there is nothing left behind in Afghanistan. So this time, the situation in Afghanistan is not the same like it was in 1996, because this time the people are more educated and they are more strong. They are always going forward. They are not staying and stuck like that 25 years ago. The time that changed, but only different is for me when I thought the Taliban is fighting for their ideology, the same way as they want like a Sharia in Afghanistan, and this they are using their religious in difficult ways. And for me, it wasn't so easy to accept and stay at home and just listening them what they want. So that's why I said the time has changed. People are not the same, especially the young generation. They are more educated than the past. They are always fighting. And I'm so happy when I saw the girls that, especially in this hard situation, they are fighting for their right, even they are facing for a death. But they are always going in the street and they are fighting for them. The only things as a Afghan that I always raise their voice, I ask everyone, stay with us, support us, and I'm sure that we can do that. If we are stay alone like we were alone, then we can do anything for a cause. And this is my hope and this is my wish, that everyone in the world, they must stay with us to work together to support the woman, to at least have the chance to study and to work. For the other things, I know it's not easy, it takes too much time, but the basic thing is education. If we are not allowed going to school and work, then it is so difficult. When I look for the background of the media in Afghanistan for the moment, sometimes I'm feeling like, in which century we are living? There is no freedom, there is nothing in Afghanistan, and it's still all the international community, they are just watching us and they are not taking the action. This is really something I don't understand. Let's say this game, when they are trying to over it, the people of Afghanistan, they need peace and security. We need democracy. We need freedom. If we are not going in that direction, I am sure the countries trying to recognize the Taliban, it is more than dangerous than Afghanistan to the world, because they are facing with the terrorist group and with the group that they did in 2001. The, let's say 11 September of attack is really, it's something, if we are thinking about that, who was behind this group, this attack? The person, they already took power in Afghanistan. They couldn't cut their relation with Al-Qaeda. They couldn't cut their relation with Haqqani network. And I am afraid that for the future, the same kind of, sorry to say that, if the international community are not controlling, then for the next future, the civil war will start in Afghanistan, and also they are trying to make a plan for other attack in some other country in the world. And that's the only things that we hope international community is not recognizing this terrorist group. Otherwise, it will be more difficult and dangerous, not only for Afghanistan, and I'm sure it will be dangerous for the world. So for that, I will stop my speak, and then maybe for in the question, if there is something about women, especially about the journalist, as a woman, when I saw the situation in Afghanistan, the freedom is died in Afghanistan. There is no clear future for that, and I hope that very soon there is some positive change, at least for a woman and also for the activists and for a journalist, that they have the chance to go and to work, and at least they stay quiet. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your insights, and I'm in awe of your courage, and I'm so sorry for your terrible experiences and for the whole situation now. And yes, of course I have many questions because there's not nearly enough being said. In fact, I would say it's not. The media has moved on completely from covering outside major terrorist attacks, and they kind of have to cover. They don't say anything at all here in the US about what's going on. I don't know if it's different in Europe. I'll ask Manal that later. And actually, right now, I'm going to give Manal the floor. She's been at the forefront of various human rights issues, but until recently, her focus has been on Arabic-speaking countries. Manal, please tell us about your background and how you got involved specifically with the Afghanistan issue.
Thank you so much, Irina. Thank you for this initiative. And I would like to thank Layluma and Madina for joining, because I know that it's a very touchy topic, but they are very brave and very inspiring. And I had the opportunity of meeting them by organizing this conference in the Liberal Party in Brussels. So as you said, I'm involved with the MENA issues, especially regarding the fight against extremism, but also regarding women's rights and minorities' rights, especially within the European Parliament with parliamentarians. But as a former candidate in the Liberal Party, I'm also a member of the Liberal Party in Belgium. I was contacted by so many people. First of all, I participated in a conference regarding minorities and women in Pakistan, in Afghanistan, in the Brussels Club of Europe. And I made a lot of research on what is happening regarding women after the Taliban takeover. So I was really shocked, and I was really out of words when I saw that so many young women and young children especially couldn't go to school simply because they are women. I feel revolted against the situation, and I said, how could this be possible in 2021? So something should be done regarding this, and I believe that as a Muslim woman, I should support Muslim and democratic voices, especially in the Arab and Muslim world. But as a human being, because as Virginia Woolf says, as a woman, I have no country. As a woman, the whole world is my country. So I think that we have to show solidarity with Afghan women, especially in the European sphere. Europe stands for so many values of equality, of freedom, of justice, of democracy, but unfortunately we didn't have any marches, any demonstrations, I mean, so far, which are very, very strong in solidarity with Afghan women. I was contacted by some friends and also diplomats saying that how can we help civil society how can we help Afghan people, young people and civil society? So I had this idea, and with the help of Deputy David Weissman, I suggested that we do something about Afghan women, and he was really happy to do that, and he supported me, and he said, "Look, I will follow you. What do you want to do? Go ahead." Because we need to show solidarity to these women. We need to give them a voice. We need to give them at least a platform to speak about what is happening, because the only version that we have is that what the Taliban are saying on the media, but we don't hear about women, how they are living the situation. They are deprived from their basic rights. There is economic violence, there is verbal violence, there is also depriving them from education. So how can we help these women to get education, to get equality, even though it is difficult from here in Europe, but at least raising awareness is the first step. And having people like Layluma Sadid, who is a journalist and a human rights activist, Madina Hamidi, who is defending freedom of speech, defending the rights of minorities, defending secularism is really important. And also Zarifa Ghaffari, who was one of first female mayor of Maidanshar, and she has shared her experience of working with the Taliban in there. So witnessing, and also Ahmed Wali, who is a young researcher who is supporting women. He is a supporter of women's rights and of Afghan youth, as well as Andy Vermouth, whom I'd like to thank, who is a human rights activist, and he is really knowledgeable about the Afghanistan issue, and he is also a supporter of women, Afghan women. So we brought all these people to speak about human rights issue and to share this experience. And I can tell you that a lot of Belgian and European people were shocked when they heard that. They were really, really moved, and they were really, really sad when they heard about it. How can this happen to young ladies and to young women in 2021? How can they be deprived from going to school, from marrying the guy they chose? So they have no choice. They have forced marriage. They have economic dependence. They have also, they are obliged, forced to put the hijab. Not only the hijab, the burqa. So and women who try to let's say to make a demonstration or to show that they are not happy with these decisions, they are completely threatened and killed and murdered and persecuted. So this is really awful when we see this, and we can do nothing about it here in Europe. And especially there was a kind of silence from feminists. I really blame feminists, especially universal feminists, who share the values of feminism and solidarity with these women and womanhood and sisterhood. But unfortunately, we have sometimes this idea of women sharing the values of liberty and supporting other women, just to support women in terms of their liberty of wearing the hijab. But when women claim their liberty not to wear the hijab, we don't find women in the streets of Brussels or Paris fighting for that, unfortunately, and this is really a pity. Now, of course, we started raising awareness, and I'm really happy that there are so many events, and next week there will be another event in our party with the Prime Minister, Mrs. Wilmès. So Vice Prime Minister, sorry. So I guess that there is a kind of raising awareness within the population, within civil society organizations, also within liberal parties and other parties, and also within the institutions. Yesterday, the day before yesterday, I attended a close meeting with the former ambassador to we can say former, but we know that this it's giving legitimacy to this government, but we cannot give legitimacy to this government as His Excellency Mr. Salserzai says, who is the ambassador of former ambassador of Afghanistan to Belgium, the EU, and NATO. We have to, if the Taliban are really showing their willingness to have a democratic government, they should make an inclusive government. This is not the truth. They don't have an inclusive government. We don't have women, we don't have minorities, we don't have LGBTI community, we don't have religious minorities. So you have nothing in this government. How can we speak about an inclusive government, and how can democratic and free countries recognize this government? This is insane. So I think that the European institutions are trying to raise awareness. There are so many other events coming up to speak about the issue, but we should continue, because we should not leave Afghan women alone, and Afghan civil society and Afghan men also, and young people and democratic voices. They should be supported. They should feel that they are supported by Muslim and non-Muslim people, and they should feel that they are only supported because they stand for freedom and democracy, and because that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, as Martin Luther King says. So if there is injustice in Afghanistan, we are not living in you know, in an ivory tower. Somehow something come to Europe, because this is what we are witnessing now, is that we are witnessing that there is going backwards of these values. Some people are getting influenced by this extremist and Islamist ideology. So we need to fight against this ideology. We need to fight against this influence, and to fight for these values, and to keep these values, and to show solidarity to democratic voices, to the resistance also in Afghanistan, because this is what most of the guest speakers said, is that we don't hear about the resistance. We should give them platform. How can you recognize the government, but we never speak about the resistance? These people who are fighting for democracy, for freedom, for equality, for justice. So we need also to give a floor to the resistance, and not recognize a government which is recognized by authoritarian regimes such as Qatar and Iran and Russia and China. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Manal, and I'll be back to you with many questions and to the whole panel, because this is actually, to me, just the start of the conversation on this topic. Now I'd like to give the floor to Medina Hamidi, and she can tell us more about herself, what she is doing now, and her own views of this current horrific predicament.
Good evening. First of all, thank you so much for this chance to hear our voices. And actually, it's not only my voice or just a few people who are invited here, but it's the voice of thousands, if not millions of people. So thank you for the chance for the world to hear our voices. Who am I? I was just a child that saw the terror of the Taliban regime. After my father was killed by them, we had to run away. We had to flee for freedom and save our lives. After 4 years, being on the way, finally we reached Belgium, and I was actually extremely happy because we could finally find freedom in its totality. Freedom doesn't come with pieces, but it's in totality. Freedom of thought, freedom of belief, freedom of religion, freedom to choose whether you continue to obey those strict cultural or religious rules, because that's it, in my eyes, that's freedom, to be free to choose your own path. So why I'm worried about the situation of Afghanistan right now? I'm very worried that there is even a consideration to recognize the Taliban regime, that is actually a terrorist group, even as a legitimate government of Afghanistan, that it's even considered, that there's even a consideration that gives me nightmares. First of all, of course, they say, yeah, we've changed. We want a little bit freedom for women. We will respect their rights. But how can you believe them if you know that the basic elements of their Sharia is against everything what is freedom and women rights? How can you even sit there and listen to their to what they say, because it's a contradiction. And they say, like Manil said, a government that will respect all rights. No, because I read an article that the spokesperson of the Taliban said, you know, people don't have to be afraid of us because we're gonna represent everyone, and every Muslim will be represented. such a big lie, because not all Afghans are Muslims. Maybe they appear or they act like they're Muslims, because otherwise they will be killed. So, or they acting or they playing a role just to survive. But in Afghanistan, we have Jews, we have Sikhs, we have Hindus, we have atheists, we have so many other beliefs other than Muslims. So if you listen very carefully to their words, actually they contradicted themselves. They say we will represent everyone, all Muslims will be represented. It's contradiction. What about atheists? What about Sikhs? What about Jews? What about Christians, for example? They're not Muslims. Their Sharia don't recognize them as respected people, because everybody who rejects Sharia must be punished. And I think they already proved us in what kind of ways, of what kind of punishment they choose for that kind of people. I think you already saw a lot of horrific images, and you saw enough. It's even hard for me to describe it with words. Another issue that I'm very worried about, it gets a lot of attention, and it's right that it gets a lot of attention. The right of women to education, of course, it's very important. But let's not forget about the boys and men. Mostly we forget them. You know, in this world we can live with men, but we cannot also live without them. You know, we need each other. The world exists of men and women, and we need each other for progression. So we have to fight and have to work together. So what's happening in Afghanistan? Now the girls are not allowed to go to university, but boys, they want to show that the boys are allowed. But please don't forget, what kind of education? The first ingredient of education is freedom of thought, freedom of belief, and freedom of religion. How can you, the Taliban, of course, how can we believe them that they are defending rights of education when they are not even respecting the freedom of thought? Because everybody who does it gets killed. And please don't let us all not be fooled. Yes, those boys go to university, but when they're brainwashed and there's no critical education possible, when there is no other books than Quran or Islamic books that they will get as education, it's not education, it's indoctrination. And it's a very dangerous thing for the future, because it's not going to stay in in Afghanistan. It's going to get here. It's going to get everywhere in the world. Because the Western countries now are very worried about immigration. Of course, people will try to do everything to escape Afghanistan. And of course, Europe, and I think in America also, the whole world is very concerned about the immigrants, the refugees, because the last crisis in 2015 proved that Europe is not ready to to have ready solutions for that kind of problem. But what I don't understand, on one hand, they complaining about immigrants and refugees. On the other hand, they try to make refugees just by considering to recognize a terrorist group as a legitimate government of a country. How can you even consider when you already know about their Sharia, about their tactics? And if I can believe the articles, the latest articles in the news, they said that the Taliban is much richer and much smarter than many years ago. So where they did get money from? And during those years that they were like absent in Afghanistan, where were they for their trainings, where they learned new tactics? Because today they use a very manipulative language. I think they learned from the past, of course, because always threatening, you know, just because you say it directly or indirectly doesn't mean that your intentions gonna be changed. Now they learn that if we speak if we use democratic words, we can fool people. But I think we really have to look further than that. Just look at their Sharia. That's impossible. Their Sharia says whoever doesn't accept Sharia, it's done. So how is possible for democracy? How is possible for all kind of people to find their freedom, democracy, happiness, good life, future, progression? There's nothing. So I think it's gonna be a huge mistake because it's not gonna stay only in Afghanistan. Even now, even in Europe, I don't have my freedom because I'm still not allowed to disobey strict cultural and religious rules. I'm abandoned by my own family. I'm alienated. They want to talk to me, even here in Europe. And my question is, why the hell do you escape them from Taliban if you punish people in the same way? And I'm not the only victim. I get daily a lot of messages from people that say, we admire your courage because you speak in public, that you don't want to be religious, that you don't want to follow those strict cultural rules. But if we do that, our family will kill us. So it's better to act, so we act. And believe me, there are numerous. I just even can't count on my fingers how many people send me with, they are desperate. There are some people that even want to kill themselves just because they cannot bear that psychological torture. Because, you know, the only difference between Taliban and that kind of people is the Taliban puts a gun next to your head, and with one bullet, you're done and you're gone. The pain is gone. But what these people do, that psychological punishment, and I'm not even talking about the social boycott and financial boycott, I'm not even talking about that. Only psychological impact of that. It's seeing the death every day, looking the death in its eyes every day, but not dying. And I'm one of those people. And it hurts, and I'm a psychotraumatologist myself. I know how to help myself. Can you imagine? And it's still hard for me. I cry every day because it's hard. It's hard. Nobody has the right to choose between freedom and love of their own family. So the impact of that kind of people, if we don't defend the right of freedom of thought and freedom to believe and to have a religion, whatever you want, if we don't fight for that right, if we don't defend that, the impact is huge. And there are many victims, but they're suffering in silence because nobody dares. Nobody has the courage to talk about it because they're risking their lives. So please think about that, and thank you so much for the chance that people can hear this voice, because it's not only my voice. At the same time, you're hearing thousands, if not millions of other people speaking with me right now. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your comments and for the insights that I think people don't even stop to think about. There, I mean, and again, I'm so sorry about this horrible pain that you have to deal with that I wouldn't wish on anybody. And I wanted to note a couple of issues. One that you brought up about the men and the boys. Throughout the first Taliban reign and also now, when Taliban imposed restrictions on shaving, on the length of the facial hair that men were allowed to do, that is a basic restriction on one's freedom to one's body. And when that was punished heavily with beatings and so forth, this is the exact sort of horrific criminal government imposition that the so-called democratic liberals in the West are supposed to fight. They spend endless amounts of time discussing abortion in the West, but they don't talk about these basic issues in Afghanistan, what Taliban has done to these people, and how they had absolutely no right to impose that level of control. And now we hear the same silence on that topic just as well. For whatever reason, it's considered less of an issue, but it shouldn't be. Anyone concerned about human rights should be equally concerned about that. The other issue that you brought up about what kind of a difference is there between the Taliban itself and the other socially conservative population of Afghanistan. I'll get back to that issue momentarily. Now I wanted to ask the panel to address the following topic, and I hope everyone can give me their thoughts about this. So there's a few statements from the U.S. administration concerning this, and I've been following this issue fairly closely, but perhaps it's possible that I am missing something. During the Taliban takeover, President Biden, when asked whether he would intervene, said that the Afghan people have the right to choose their own government. Not that this was particularly a choice for most minorities. Taliban is 90% Pashtun, but the 10% who are not in it, I would presume we're also not supportive of it necessarily. Because it's mostly one type of tribe, but that doesn't mean that everyone who belongs to that type of population supports it. And it was very obvious that it was not going to be inclusive because it's a very hardline Islamist group which is not known for tolerance to other points of view. So how anyone could possibly have been fooled is an issue. So President Biden says that Afghan people have to choose. Essentially, I guess he was saying if they don't want that government, they have to fight against it. But, I'll get to that topic momentarily. Then recently he announced a manifesto of gender equity, a 1,500-word declaration stating that gender equity around the world is a top priority for the United States government, for this administration. And at the same time, we are seeing horrific videos of women being beaten by the Taliban, women protesters on the streets, being beaten by the government. We are seeing people who have been killed. We've seen singers, we've seen women activists. We've heard these sorts of news. We have not really heard, and all we've heard from the administration is that they will be providing humanitarian aid directly to the Taliban. We have not, at least I have not heard of any efforts to remedy this situation of women being physically attacked and other people being physically attacked by the Taliban or killed. We have not really seen any concrete action other than the freezing of the government funding which took place at the takeover. But since then, I'm not aware of any action. Can anyone here comment if the US or any of the NATO members have taken any concrete action on the government level to address these abuses that are already being documented? And anyone in the panel and all of them can please, I would love to hear your thoughts about these statements by the US administration and whether there's been any action to follow up these supposed commitments.
Let me start by this word that when United States start during the government of, let's say, the presidency of Trump. They start peace negotiation. It took too long. The first mistake starts from that moment. Few different reasons. First, they bring a terrorist group in the negotiation table. They legitimize them, and mistakes start from that side. Because in one hand, they're in the blacklist of United States and also in the United Nations. In the other hand, they said, we want to make a peace with them and bring them in this side. In the other side also, they are fighting with the government. It's like a confusion. The Afghans thought we are in peace, we are in fight with who? With the terrorist group that we know as a terrorist, and the other hand, they bring them in the negotiation table. It was like a confusion between the Afghan people and also for the, let's say, for the armies. They said they're our brothers. Then if they are brothers, they are allowed to kill us and we are not defend? How we justify that? Then took too much time. Finally, in February, they start sign the agreement between Taliban and also United States. Again, the bad mistake, I think, in this 21st century in the world was that to bring a terrorist group without giving the chance for the Afghan people to hear their voice and put one word about the people of Afghanistan in the agreement and said, okay, everyone is coming, including the foreign minister of the United States in Doha, sitting with more than 70 countries, international organization, and everyone is claiming, okay, we signed the agreement. Come on, this is the big mistake you did, and you start against the government, against the regime that 20 years you built on that. And again, you come and you bring Taliban and replace Taliban by Taliban. This is the big mistake they did. And then said, okay, in the agreement, there is few different paper in annex. No one knows still what was on that, they return. No word in the agreement about women, no word about all this achievement we had in this 20 years. And also there is nothing about, as Medina said, about the freedom of the beliefs, freedom of speech, freedom, anything about that, because they are dealing with the extremist, terrorist group. If they are putting this and not adding Republic of Afghanistan, they never came. And this was another mistake that they did. And they said, yeah, the name of the country is not so important, but the important is to have a peace. Okay, Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. And by name said, they are not believing, they are not trusting, they are not accepting freedom, woman right, freedom of speech, belief and thought and everything. And even they are not accepting the basic right of life started from the education. So it was a big mistake they did, and they bring this terrorist group in the table, had a agreement, and then they said, yeah, Taliban, if they are fighting, they shouldn't come in the capital of the cities. What does it mean? For example, we put them in around like a Brussels, and we keep just only in Brussels. If we close all the way, then this center will collapse, because they will never receive anything that support the government. So in the agreement, there was thousands of mistakes like that. when you talk about that, they said, yeah, but we cannot continue to fight with them. The only way is negotiation. Negotiation, it means to collapse the country and give for the person and we make the change. No, what does it mean? Then why 25 years ago you start and fighting a camp in Afghanistan and then again the same situation? If we are really, I'm not talking like as journalist, but this is the thought of millions of Afghans like they are in Afghanistan. They said always, okay, but for what reason they came 20 years in Afghanistan, spending thousands of billions in Afghanistan, killed thousands of international soldiers in Afghanistan. And how they are justifying now 20 years, there is nothing in Afghanistan. When they lose why they lose their son or girls in the fight of terrorists in Afghanistan and then bring them again in Afghanistan. And there's a lot of examples like that. And also for the President Biden, they always listening the military way, or they are listening for the political way, but they are not listening the thought of the ordinary people. The politician analyzes different, the military is different. Then if you talk with the civil society, it's different. In the peace negotiation in Afghanistan, there was sometimes politician and mostly the military. And there is no chance about that to see really the situation in Afghanistan is in which direction going. The politician and also for the government of corrupt like President Ghani, he never said that we have a lot of problem in Afghanistan in my government, because he was a corrupt government from himself, his wife, and also the person who was around him. They are all corrupt and they are like a mafia. They are working only between themselves. The soldiers in the fight in the place in their military base, 6 months, they didn't receive their salaries. They are eating only bread, sometimes with the, I don't know, they call like a soup. Then they are taken by name of the police and armies and also for the teachers. They didn't receive their salaries few months and they are taking all money by the name of the Afghans and they corrupted. And then they continue the same way till the moment that we saw it in our eyes without any fight. The government not allowed any army to fight. And they said, yeah, you stay, and then till the moment that we order to fight, to defend. Then the provinces collapse like that without any fight. In some provinces, when they fight, then from the government or from the defense ministry, they said, you should stand by when we say you should start fighting or defend. Till the moment that we saw in 1 month, 30 provinces collapsed. So this is the plan that they did, or it was some scenario really the United States want in that kind of going in this direction. There is thousands of questions to ask about that and think why it happens like that. And we saw it in these few days, or let's say months. Woman is strong. This is the really positive things, and I am happy and I am really proud for the ladies. They are standing and going out and protest for themselves. In their face of that, but they are very strong. And this is the time that we should stay with them. As the other speakers said, yeah, the international community, this is really, it's time for everyone, not only for 1 or 2 countries, not like a small group of women or ladies, or to stay with them. This is the time everyone is stay and united to fight for them. And the extremism, this is not problem only for the Afghans. And as I said before, it will be a big problem for the world. We must separate, let's say, religious with the politics to find the way. Otherwise, if we are mixing like all the other Islamic countries, then we never find the solution. And they always said, Sharia, Sharia, Sharia. No, we must separate that. We cannot bring mullah or imam that they said in Europe, put them in the defense ministry or put them in the government like a foreign ministry. They knows anything about that? Till the moment we are separate them, then it will be not easy to fix the problem. And they are talking about, okay, the situation is now, it's become different. No, Taliban never change. They will never change. They are even more violent than the past. And they are really not give any chance for anyone to talk freely. Freedom in Afghanistan is, I think, it's end. And we must fight for that. And that's why I feel that that's my job. It's my responsibility to fight for them, for the future of the girls. Not only myself, we are fighting for them. And we need support. So if I'm going for the demonstration, you mentioned it also for the protest of the women in Afghanistan, you saw it. Just for a small group, hundreds of the Taliban come inside and they're try to, if they are shouting a little bit stronger, they are trying to kill them. And world is watching them. That's really not judgment. And this is the time that we need to do action, not always stay and we say, yeah, we are trying to find a way to talk with the Taliban. Again, this is another mistake. Then they are thinking that, okay, the world is coming and talk with us. No, put them in a very big pressure. First, sanction for the Taliban. Increase the list of the black list of the commander of the Taliban, who is really, for the moment, in the cabinet of the Taliban. They put that. Then the other one, the Pakistan, because this country, since the regime of the, let's say the time of Mujahideen was growing up from Pakistan and then supporting by them, but financially we know from which countries it's, so we can think for all this kind of things without pressure, without sanction, without increasing the blacklist of the number of the terrorist group in Afghanistan in the blacklist of the United Nations, then it's again the other mistake. And if we are giving money for the Taliban by name of the people, like the past, they gave money only for the government and they received the money, and at the end, with the millions of dollars, they left the country and leave the people in this poverty. So this is the big mistake. If they are trying to do that, I think the politician or the world never learn from their mistake. And I hope this time it not happen like that. Otherwise, I'm sure the world never forgive anyone if they are doing again the same mistake. Thank you. Sorry for taking too much time.
Not at all. And thank you so much for your comments. And it sounds like right now nothing is really being done. And all of these proclamations about democracy by the West has been just an excuse to not take any action. But maybe Dr. Manal will disagree.
Actually, yes. There is an action, maybe in terms of the European Commission. There is a program also with the European Union, but I do agree with with Lailuma that we need also to check this money, where this money is going. Actually, $200 million euros, sorry, are going to finance the refugee crisis, to deal with the refugee crisis, and to deal with education and women. But of course, we cannot give this money to the let's say to a minority, and we cannot trust this government. We cannot trust this government. So at least the United Nations and the European Union should go and should investigate, and they should work hand in hand with civil society organizations, because we have a lot of people here in the diaspora, the Afghan people working with the civil society organization. We can collaborate with these people, we can work with these people, but giving the money to Taliban without any restrictions, without any, let's say, rules, or without any demands, this is also, as Lailuma said, is a mistake. The second thing is also doing the same thing with Pakistan. What Europe is doing now with the GPS Plus is permitting Pakistan to be, let's say, a privileged economic partner, but on the other hand, they should respect women's rights, the rights of minorities, freedom of speech, also stop forced marriage, stop persecution of women, violence against women, all these issues. So Pakistan should also make an effort, and we saw how the governments in place was for so many years manipulating the European Union. So it's very important to work to play on this card. Of course, I understand that because we are in politics, we are not. I mean, in La La Land, it's not. We know that there are other forces like now China and Russia and Iran and Turkey and Pakistan, which are let's say recognizing this government and maybe helping and supporting this government. So the European Union wants to play the negotiating role and trying to be a peace builder and a peace dealer, especially when the United States are retreating. So but of course, not negotiating and not putting terms and conditions to the contract and giving money without any terms and conditions would be very dangerous, because as Lailuma said, they will take the money and leave people in poverty. They would not advance women's rights. They would not advance education. They would not. The money that is going from the European Union, from the NATO or from the United Nations should be really working working for the interests of the people, working for education, for young people, for women. Otherwise, I mean, we are facing a huge humanitarian crisis in South Asia. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Medina, I would like to hear from you. And have you seen anything from the US or from other countries that is actually helpful, as opposed to just, meaningless statements, very rare ones? And has there been any actual efforts to mitigate the damage done by Taliban already?
The first thing that I want to say is what President Biden said, that from now on, it's to Afghan people to choose their government. I don't know, but does President Biden knows the definition of the word choice? Because how can you talk about choice when there is a terrorist group just knocks on your door and forces you to accept them or to obey them or obey their rules? It's not choice, it's surrendering. So there's one issue, that how he can even use that word. I don't understand. And second thing that really shocked me, that what I just heard, that there's even an idea to give Taliban the money so they can help the citizens. I don't know who came up with that idea, but but it's even worse than nightmare, because isn't it indirect way, kind of way to actually support a terrorist group? We all know, I don't know, even my child who is only 4 years old will not believe that if you give the Taliban the money, that they will use it for the people and not for buying more weapons or more terrorist equipment to terrorize people. Or the next step would be the world. Of course, they have to start somewhere. In Afghanistan, because people are so tired. They've been through transgenerational trauma, and they've seen so many years of war. They tired, they traumatized, they took education from them, so they have to start like from zero. And then there comes Taliban again. What do you expect? What do you expect for them? The only thing that Taliban will do, and I think they already proved that, they will only indoctrinate boys, young boys, to become the future Talibans, and the girls only to bear them new children, so they can become more and more and more, so they become powerful. They don't respect women as human beings. They only see them as a machine or a fabric that will bring you the children. That's it. That's why they stopped education for girls at the age of, if I'm not wrong, right before the puberty, because they want them to be married and not at schools, because educated girls can be dangerous. Dangerous in a way, they will fight for their freedom. But when they are children and they become mothers, they're already illiterate, they're already traumatized, and they have to take care of other children, to educate new generation. I don't know, we don't have to be psychologists to just realize the impact, not only psychological impact, but the developmental, all kind of ways. The future will be non-existent. The only people that you will meet in Afghanistan, there will be brainwashed young men who will become, who will be indoctrinated by the Sharia law, and they will give it to the generation and generation, because they're the only people who are allowed to work. There will be men, not women. So if they're indoctrinated and brainwashed, what kind of education they will give to the next generation? And how can we hope that if the whole country becomes a home for a terrorist group, and they become stronger and stronger and stronger, how we cannot sit here comfortably and not fear the future for the world, and not only for Afghanistan? So I really hope that they hear what we are saying, because it will come to every person in the world. It will affect every person in the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your comments. I'd like to ask a couple more questions of the panel. My first question is about the role of foreign players in creating and exacerbating the situation. Qatar, for instance, has pushed this propaganda, Taliban propaganda, of more moderate Taliban, and in conjunction with the US government sold it to the public, creating the impression that Taliban has somehow changed its ways over time, but in reality providing Taliban leadership with both the means and the political acumen to just make themselves more effective with what they were already doing. And after creating this situation, they are now claiming credit for supposedly rescuing refugees, which they helped create, and they're expecting international support for their role in evacuating these refugees. how would you evaluate this involvement of an actor known for funding Islamist organizations in creating the situation and essentially working with the US government as a quote unquote ally on this completely disgraceful political scenario that could have been probably avoided if not for the financial and political legitimacy granted by on this high level. I'd like to hear your thoughts because I'm not hearing much pushback or criticism internationally. The media has, raised questions about it, but did not really, but everyone has shied away from confronting this directly, and even members of the US military have avoided talking about Qatar's role in all of this. And anyone can start.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. This is really good question to see the rule of the Islamic country in Afghanistan in many different ways. As we saw it in the beginning, that the first place that the Taliban created their own official office was Qatar, and up to now they're based, let's say, in Qatar. They're trying to make a play good rule between the Islamic countries to show them that, okay, we are there helping the countries, Islamic countries, like Afghanistan is also Islamic countries, and Qatar or even the other Arabic countries. They are, let's say, since the Mujahideen during 1970, they are involved in many different ways in Afghanistan, and they are supporting by money, by equipment, and many different ways to have like a pure Islamic countries. That's something like not easy to go with the background of jihad when they start their, let's say, small parties, political parties, to fight against the communist regime, from which country they support, politically, economically, and also in the military way. So don't forget, from that time, some Arabic countries already start helping that groups to fight against communists in Afghanistan. This is the way that also United States support many different ways. Don't forget, Mujahideen was also supported by American. On that time, they said they are great Mujahideen. And then till the moment that the communist regime left the country and the government collapsed, and then the Mujahideen take the power, and we saw the civil war start. Like now, different countries help them, the Mujahideen, when they take the power, then they left. And we saw the civil war start in Afghanistan. And this scenario is like a repeating with a little bit different change. And before 9/11, Mujahideen was only the group that they were proud that they said, okay, they are fighting for their people. And we saw it. The great army during the communist regime war in the region was in Afghanistan. Very powerful country from the economic and also for the military and the politics. And then by the help of few countries, they bring Mujahideen, and then civil war, and people said, if Islam and the Mujahideen is like that, we don't want. And then they try to bring, and let's say they burned the Taliban, the same countries, the same scenario, but with different name. Then they put Mujahideen in the way they said that they are warlords. excuse me, where they can support this warlord. And now you said they're warlord. When they fight for your benefit, they was hero. And then they said, because some political way that I'm not going with the details, that why they are fighting with each other. Again, the same story. Some fascist group in Afghanistan, they said, we want to take the power, all the country, and we don't want the other ethnic group to come and stay with us. Then civil war started. Like now, the power is only for the hand of the one ethnic group, and they are not giving the chance for anyone. Even during this 20 years, the same story. So let's go back in the way of the Qatar or some Arabic countries. They are trying to help, but Afghanistan is not the country that going like a colonized in some other countries. We never accept that. And if you read the story of Afghanistan, 3 times with Great Britain, they fight. And then again with the communists, and let's say USSR, big power country on that time in the world. And then they fight with that, bring the American. And now the Taliban said we are victory because we fight with the Taliban and we win. So there is a lot of different ways to think about that and see the countries trying to be involved because they have their benefit also with the political and strategical relation with the world. And that's why they are trying to do some game with the others using Afghanistan, and they're trying to show that we are helping. But don't forget, we said that if this place was burned, then the fire or the smoke is coming around you. Mm-hmm. And don't forget that otherwise it will be so difficult and different. And there is also some other Islamic countries in the region. They are never honest with Afghanistan, especially Pakistan. We saw it. And also the other Islamic countries, Iran. And now China is big problem for our country. And then again, if China, Iran, Pakistan, and Russia is coming in Afghanistan, they are playing or they are coming and take like a power in Afghanistan, I'm sure world will not stay like that. And again, the war will start in Afghanistan and then going again the same situation. And who will be victim in this war? Always the people of Afghanistan. And this is the scenario. They are playing on that and they are trying to use and said, okay, now Taliban is good. They are coming here to help the people. And in the same time, they are supporting Daesh. I don't believe Daesh is different than Taliban. In the beginning, years ago, when few attacks happened in Kabul, they said, this is a group of Taliban. They are separated from this group and they became fighting. And they put the name of Daesh on it. But when you look at deeply, they are the old member of the Taliban. Just they put the name and change the color of the flag, but the ideology is the same. Taliban, Daesh is, for me, they are the same. And I believe that they are not coming like the Daesh they were in Iraq or Syria in some other countries, because they was this exactly the same group and just they separated and they said, okay, we are working with the Daesh. And that's not the same. Really, they are the group of the Taliban and they are separating and then they are playing in this rule and then they are using them against the Taliban because Taliban said, we are trying to support. The first attack during the last days of United States and Taliban took power in Afghanistan happened, they said it is Daesh. It's unbelievable. All countries under the control of the Taliban, from very close to them, let's say high to high, they come and did attack. How it's possible if they are not supporting by Taliban? Then we know that Taliban and Daesh, for me, they are one group, but with two different color of flag. And then there's the same story. They are coming now by name, okay. One day attack in Kabul, second day attack in Jalalabad, the other day attack in Kandahar, and then different provinces. And they want to show that, Taliban is good, but now Daesh is in Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. And this is really a very bad game that they are playing. And I'm sure that they must stop and say, okay, Taliban and Daesh, they are the same. We must stop them and put a lot of pressure, and then they are trying to find the solution and give the chance for the Afghan people, and they must accept the constitution and going for the election, and then they should make a government with the, let's say, as they say, but I'm sure never happened in the reality in Afghanistan, coalition government, unity government, or I don't know what they want, inclusive government, but at least this time, without any intervention of the foreigner countries, they gave a chance for the Afghan people to choose and decide for their future. Thank you.
Thank you. That was actually a really excellent point. And some analysts raised similar points, but you went a little bit further, and actually by mentioning that the ISIS in Afghanistan, it's not the original, Ba'ath members in Arab states, nor are they just random radicalized sympathizers. They're literally members of the same group with a different color.
Yeah.
It's really quite astounding how the U.S. sold this fairy tale to the rest of the world with the help of other actors. And
let me add a small point about you said about the U.S. and don't forget the point that the negotiation group, when they start for Afghanistan, the person who was in charge for that, he was Afghan American. Mm-hmm. And everyone knows his belief and his thought. Since the communist regime, this guy is trying to help in many different ways, not help Afghan people to bring their ID in Afghanistan. And he is the friend, and I think they are in the same, they are both studied in Beirut, American University in Beirut. And they are, the President Ghani and also Khalilzad, who is more thinking very in the way, let's say, he's more than Nazis in Afghanistan. In the way to bring the fascism in Afghanistan, it's 70, let's say 70 or more than 80 years. They're always bringing one ethnic group. I'm not talking only about the Pashtun, but because Pashtuns also the victim is this war. They only bring the group that they trust on them, and they never trust for the other Afghan people, mm-hmm. also including the Pashtuns. There's also thousands of Pashtuns, they are really victim of this war. Mm-hmm. And Khalilzad played really very, very sad game for our people, but good player for the war, for the United States. And they are coming first time for the pipeline, is coming from, they called that on that time Unical, and now they changed the name to Topi. And he's trying to bring the war there to have their benefit, because he was some of the chief on this big company of the oil. And then they said, okay, for the people of Afghanistan, maybe he said, for me, it's not interesting. The more interesting for me to have this pipeline to be benefit. And they start by that. And finally, they achieved this goal. And the first time they signed officially this agreement. And now they are playing because the Taliban took the power and Taliban is supported by Khalilzad. So this is the story, always in different way playing, but the scenario is the same. Only time to time they are changing the way, the name and this kind of things and going the same situation.
My understanding also, just to comment on that point briefly before I give the floor to Manal, is that he was also very close to the Iran regime, and also the fact that this whole oil industry, a lot of Islamists from other countries had an interest and a stake in that, and there was the whole pipeline with Tajikistan and oil companies that had the entrenched interest from other countries going back to the 80s, certain established interests who had personal financial investments in arming certain hardline mujahideen who ended up evolving into Taliban, not just average mujahideen, but specific groups backed by ISI, promoted by hardliners, linked to Islamist interests in various Arab states who had financial investments in the oil industry. I understand that also played a role in Khalilzad's politics and his connection to all these people, and of course why he was chosen to be the ambassador to begin with, given his past. I mean, the Trump administration was anti-Iran, but yet they chose this extremely disreputable character, and they have not done much to change or put pressure on the official government to begin with. Sounds to me like there was this corrupt arrangement that was ultimately facilitated and sold by Qatar, had a lot more at stake than just US looking to end forever wars. It sounds to me like there were deals being cut through this guy that financially benefited a lot of people who wanted to create a chaotic situation, knew what was going to happen as a result of that, and deliberately facilitated the worst possible outcome out of this. That's what it sounds from these pieces, but I want to hear from Dr. Manal.
Yes, thank you, Irina. Going back to the story of Islamism in Arab countries, and we have seen that lately Islamism is losing the ground, actually, especially in so many countries in the Maghreb and in the Middle East and in North Africa, and after losing the ground, especially in Morocco, Tunisia, in Libya, in Egypt. So I think that the Islamists felt really in danger, and they lost completely the ground. So what happened is the idea that Qatar supports Taliban is that telling to the world, hey, I'm not losing the ground. This is just temporary, but I have another card to play. The other card is Taliban, and I'm going to be a negotiator in this game, because actually the fact that having Iran, Pakistan, Turkey also, and China and Russia, of course, the communist regimes, authoritarian, and they are. We already know that there are agreements between Iran and China to work in the Middle East. So there are common agreements. Especially within the Middle East and the Gulf countries. So the fact that Qatar and Turkey and Iran, these authoritarian regimes and these Islamist regimes which support Islamism, support Taliban, is that having another card to play. Actually, Turkey was playing in the Mediterranean, threatening East Mediterranean in the especially Greece and Egypt. There was a kind of war between Egypt and Turkey, as well as Greece, and after so many let's say negotiations and putting pressure on the Turkish regime, now the Turkish regime is retreating. But with the Taliban coming back to power, this is another card to play by the Islamists. It's showing, hey, we are here. We didn't lose the ground in these countries. We are not in power, I mean, in these countries, but we are in power in South Asia. And now we have our word to say. And America and the West and the EU are obliged to negotiate with these people, because otherwise they are going to use the refugees pressure, cards to put pressure on EU and US, and especially the EU. And this is what happened with the Syrian crisis. So it's more or less the same scenario with the refugees crisis in Syria. Now we are going back to a kind of negotiation, but with this authoritarian regime, with Iran, with Raisi as a president, who is called the Bashar, with the Turkish regime, with Pakistan. We are witnessing a very touchy and delicate period in terms of diplomatic relations, and especially this is the fight for the dignity and for the freedom and democracy of the Afghan people, is not only a fight for the Afghan people, also freedom and dignity and liberation for all the other countries, especially in the region. The Iranian people who are fighting against the Iranian regime, the Turkish people who are fighting against the Islamist regime, the Pakistani people also fighting against the Islamist power, the Islamist government which is in power. So all these countries, by seeing the Taliban in power, are really getting a blow to their fight. So we need to support these people. We need to support these countries. The resistance in Iran, or the opposition in Turkey, or all these people fighting for freedom, because otherwise we are giving this authoritarian, this extremist regime a card they are going to play on for the coming years.
Thank you so much. And
to destabilize the region, of course. Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it sounds to me, earlier I was talking to an Egyptian analyst who predicted that with the death throes of the Muslim Brotherhood in Europe, and with the fact that Qatar and Turkey are both looking, they have not gained from that particular structure. They may be now shifting their support to other groups who are not formally affiliated with the Arabic, Egyptian and Turkish Brotherhood from the Kaiser's roots in Egypt, but are now looking to other groups that share the same ideology, but are also independent of this corrupted old structure. So
and they of course, the Muslim Brotherhood and the Islamist parties and regimes, they presented themselves as progressive at the very beginning. This is what they presented themselves as not secular but very progressive, and they promised to keep women's rights, to fight for women's rights, to keep gender equality. They promised all these things, but later on we have seen the results in Turkey, in Tunisia, in Egypt, everywhere. So everywhere where the Islamists are in power, the women are completely put aside and discriminated against. So again, we know that Taliban, Islamists, the Islamists are more political and more, let's say, they have more experience in terms of political let's say strategy and agenda, because they have been in power since more than 60 years, and they are very, very smart in that. But of course the Taliban are going to be let's say supported by these people, and they are going to change their narrative, as they are doing now, and they try to show themselves as let's say progressive, and promise that they are going to respect women's rights, to give women some liberties, let's say, or some rights. But at the end, this is just let's say This is just seducing the West to get budget, to get financing, to get recognition also from other countries. But we will see that as it was the case with the Islamist government, that in a few years the results will be very catastrophic for the region, economically and at the human and human rights level, and at economic level. The results are completely disastrous and catastrophic.
And the irony in all of this is that Qatar has its own situation for women is probably the worst in all of the GCC that no one talks about. And in Turkey, it has collapsed catastrophically over the last few years of AKP governance. So, which is also not widely discussed.
Not an example to follow at all.
Significantly. So the fact that anyone would take any testimony from either country at the current juncture concerning the situation with Taliban and its supposed moderation is astounding. I can't imagine how there was a concerted media propaganda campaign by major media in the US to push this narrative from the administrations, first under Trump, with whom they generally disagreed and everything else, and later under Biden, and especially under Biden. And it's astounding to me how supposedly liberal media that supposedly cares so much about human rights is actually pushing blatant falsehoods to the general population in an attempt to justify that these regimes are backed by other extremely radical regimes and who spend a lot of money on promoting these terrible ideas. Now, I'd like to give the floor to Medina on this topic before asking my last question.
Thank you. To be honest, I don't have a lot of knowledge about this specific issue. The only thing that I can say is when there is an international law that says that funding terrorist groups is a crime, why Saudi Arabia and Pakistan stay unpunished? Because everybody knows that they are supporting and financing the Taliban.
Well, to make an interjection, Saudi Arabia switched its position on Taliban in 2012 officially. It's an official fact. Up until the point they did support and finance the Taliban, in 2012 they stopped and they actually joined the US in opposing the Taliban, quite frankly. And actually right now, it's one of the very few holdouts that has formally rejected recognition of the Taliban. But what I should note is that some of the old guard individuals involved in the Saudi government did express some level of support for the Taliban for their own corrupt financial reasons. And those individuals we should be aware of, because they are opposed to the official policy of the country, and they are certainly opposed to the recent progressive reformist, I would say, anti-Islamist positions taken by the Crown Prince and his supporters. So it's true that until 2012, Saudi Arabia did support the Taliban. Then they officially formally cut ties. They are still officially opposed to it, but there are some people there who, as I mentioned earlier, go back to the 80s and their old school and pro-Islamist involvement in the area, who should be held accountable for trying to push this policy for their own reasons. And in terms of Pakistan, I agree with you, they never actually changed their position on this issue and never even really tried.
Thank you so much.
But I believe that anyone who is actively supporting Taliban should in fact be held accountable. My last question, though, actually goes back to what Medina said earlier, which is Taliban is basically one particular group of people with a majority representing one ethnic group. But the ideology of the Taliban is shared by many others who are opposed to Taliban for ethnic, tribal, sectarian reasons, but otherwise, very much share some of the same Islamist or extremely conservative and tribalist view of the role of women, ethnic minorities, or other ethnicities, and so forth. So the question I want to raise is when the US announced its intention to withdraw, and it took some time, but once that became finalized, we saw the collapse of institutions across the country and the fact that essentially there was almost no fight. And some of the commentators were saying that the Taliban ideology is far more prevalent in the country, that a lot of the US-led reforms never reached those people on a deep level. They introduced legal rights for women on a government level, but never really reached much of the country, and this ideology was never really reformed or modernized. So the question is, okay, we are focusing on Taliban now because they are exclusive to other ethnicities, and they've taken power illegally and usurped the power violently. But what about the fact that this ideology has broader support, that it may have contributed to the collapse of these other institutions, and that the fact is there's a lot of people who, had they been in power instead of Taliban, would probably be also not good for women's rights or any other rights for anybody else. How do we address this issue that no one really wanted to discuss for the past 20 years?
Should I answer or somebody else want to?
Yeah, please go ahead, and then I'll get back to Lailuma and to Mana.
The first thing that I really want to stress, it's what's been said about, yeah, we tried everything, but the majority of the people didn't, so the democracy, freedom of thought, and these kind of things, that we didn't reach the whole population. But please let me, of course, the problem, the reality is that the problem of Afghanistan, you cannot just with one sentence from the political view or from economical view, just with one sentence, you cannot explain the problematic of Afghanistan. Actually, you also have the psychological side of the problems of many Afghans. What do you expect from people who, the new generation of Afghan people, they haven't seen anything else but horror, their families being killed in front of their eyes, the education was completely taken away from it. So they need time to heal in order to be able to build a new strong and an intellectual generation. It takes time. I don't know exactly the absence, if we believe that, the absence of Taliban during the last years. It's not enough for the whole generation to recover, to heal what the war, many years of war has done to them. And now expect after a few years just to expect that they like all become Einsteins and they become with a new mentality, with fresh mentality. They didn't get a lot of chances. But it's not completely true that it didn't reach Afghan people, because when if you really followed, it was progressing. It was progressing. Okay, if maybe with not that kind of speed that we would love to see that, but it was getting there. But what happens? Bam, the Taliban again. So the people are exhausted, not only physically, but also mentally. I think it's gonna take the damages that they've, the Taliban or other kind of wars, they put Afghan people through. It takes many years of recovery. So I think it's a little bit unrealistic to accept on this. Yes, 10 years is a decennium, yes, but it's not enough to recover all that transgenerational trauma. So it's one thing, and the other important thing, yes, of course, that ideology is it's not specific to one kind of tribe. It's true, but what I'm concerned about people, if the Taliban gets the legitimate title of government, being a government officially from Afghanistan, for example, now the girls, baby girls, are sold without being persecuted, punished, or anything else. It's like buying and selling bread. Because it's on the Taliban regime, it's okay. But this kind of criminal activities will be more normal than abnormal to be punished. If, let's say that if the Taliban does not get this recognition, and we will fight against that terrorist organization, so it's not only the chance that people will fall into poverty, so they were so desperate that they actually forced to sell their children to be able to survive, but also it's possible to make these kind of activities illegal by constitutional law, by other kind of law, but it's gonna be a criminal. The chances are that this kind of activities would fall under criminal acts, and that's the difference. The only difference is with Taliban or without Taliban. Yes, of course, you will always have the people that will share that kind of barbaric ideology, but with the Taliban being on the power, they get more power. Without Taliban, with a free government, those people will be punished, will be not only punished, but also reduced to be vanished. That because that kind of activities shouldn't be legal. And I think that's the biggest difference. But the other issue was the important thing is what I was specifically talking about people who are fighting for freedom of thought. And I think those kind of people, they respect all kind of religions, but they also believe in the fact that people are also have also the right to not to believe if they don't want to. Because what happens with Taliban, it's okay, Sharia, okay, you believe, you're with us, if not, you're dead. Those kind of people are in danger, it's catastrophic, because a lot of people act like they are Muslims. And that's why the idea, maybe that's also an illusion we have, that a lot of people have the same ideology or share the same ideology or support, because most people act. They have to act, otherwise they don't survive. Like those people who send me messages from Pakistan or all other Islamic countries, they say, we have to act, we don't want to pray, but we do it just to be able to make that day. So my question is, knowing that the other side of the truth, how can we be sure of those people who act like they're supporting Taliban, or they have the same ideology, that they are not doing it because of fear, but they are really share that ideology? So I think it's a biggest question mark that it's very difficult to find out.
Thank you so much for your insights on this topic, because it's not one that is being widely discussed again. I'd like to hear what Lailuma thinks about this issue.
Let me start from the other side, how to deal and what is the solution for Afghanistan for the future. Since I know myself, we, let's say, see different regime in Afghanistan. None of them really correctly and concretely work in Afghanistan. The only way that I think about that now more strongly is to divide Afghanistan in two parts, like South or North and East Afghanistan. Because we have, I'm not talking about 250 years that one ethnic group in the power of Afghanistan, and until now we saw always the same story and nothing has changed. The good way to finish the war and also to give the chance for everyone in Afghanistan is the best way is divide or apart Afghanistan from North and South. Because the story of Afghanistan is really different. After a few decades, it's become changing. No one is trying to work honestly with each other. Pashtun with the Tajik, Tajik with Uzbek, Uzbek with Hazara, and then all of them together. They are in the political way to show for the world and play with them. They said, okay, we are all in a power, but no, power is always for the number one in the government and they are controlling. So that is why always we couldn't see the situation really in a different way that the people are thinking in Afghanistan. We must give this idea for the world. Okay, let's see the Sudan. Different problem. They are trying in many different situations. Then does it work? And then they become divided. And now there is less problem in one side and the problem the other side. And then at least they find the solution. And in this way, in Afghanistan also, I feel that if we stay in that, then it will be more difficult. And what should understand? Because in the way of political, as a former diplomat, I know the diplomacy, and they're always trying to find a way of, they say, diplomacy, but some countries doesn't work with the diplomacy. We must put some pressure. And they said, okay, we try to find the way to solve the problem, not bring the problem. If it doesn't work, then we will find the other way. Only the problem between Pakistan and Afghanistan is the Durand line. If you are talking about that, then in Afghanistan, it's like a big challenge. Why? This is the international border. It was recognized. And if we say that it's an official border, they are not accepting. But without any visa or passport, you cannot reach that country. So I don't understand what is the problem. The problem, I know that they are not accepting. And then the Pakistani, for sure, they say, this is our territory. And they already signed for that. So if not on that way, if not the coalition government, if not the communist regime, if not with the Islamic Mujahideen regime, if not with the Republic of government, and not with the Islamists. So the best way is to divide two parts of Afghanistan, then it will be more easier for everyone, I think, and then we can reach at least something to give a power from both sides and say, okay, now this is your country, the same name, but only North and South, then find a solution and work for their people, and world should support. Because with the federalism idea in Afghanistan, they said it doesn't work. They are afraid, okay, if, for example, in the North, we have federalism, then they become a power. If we give a power, for example, it's the federalism, then every region, like they have their power, they are not agree with that. So they said it doesn't work. If federalism doesn't work, the Islamic doesn't work, and the communist regime doesn't work, and also the republicans doesn't work, then there is no way that separate apart Afghanistan. And for me, this is the only way to work on that and give this idea for everyone. I know it's not easy, but at least we should talk about that. We make a referendum and ask the people, 1, 2, 3, this all problem doesn't work in Afghanistan. So what is the solution? 1, 2, 3. Okay, make a referendum and people should choose, and then I'm sure that we will find the solution. And in that point, a lot of Afghans, I'm not talking about all Afghans, but the intellectual people in Afghanistan who is living in Afghanistan or who is living out of Afghanistan in many different countries, they believe that this is the only way and work in Afghanistan. So for me, let's say I'm focused in that part, and from now, I would always trying to say, this is the only way to work. And the other problem that there is no way for a woman right, and there is no right at all in a woman for Afghanistan. And Taliban is the terrorist group. They are not believing anything. And even the resolution 1325, they are really not agree with that. And also with the resolution of the human rights. So with this kind of terrorist group, why we put again the people every day, they are torturing and executing and killing the people, and then we are just watching. Then we should find a solution and make this country in 2 parts, and then we will see. I'm sure that it is the only way that Afghanistan become peaceful to see a good future. Otherwise, 20 years continue like that, and then the other is coming, and then the same story until when? And how many more we will see in Afghanistan every day? They are killed by the terrorist group. And really, as a woman, as a human, people of Afghanistan really need in a peace to survive, because as a person, like I was born with the war. It is 41 years, and we never saw peace in Afghanistan, and before also like that. So I think enough is enough. World should respect the choice of Afghan people, and we should go in a referendum and put this idea, okay, Afghanistan is divided in 2 parts, and then I'm sure that the solution is only that. Thank you, but I forgot your question. I'm sorry, I went to the other direction, sorry.
No, it's okay, but I think that was another issue that I did not ask. But you know, to respond directly to your comment, I'm seeing increased splintering of nation states based on the fact that tribal and sectarian issues, historic issues that were more of a natural human inclination, were never fully resolved or addressed, not by the occupying powers, not by partner states. And as a result, they've created extreme internal pressures that is becoming nearly impossible to overcome. And that's been deliberately exacerbated by various external forces for their own reasons. So the splinter, we are seeing what you mentioned, Sudan, we are seeing same sort of separatism going on in Nigeria, in Yemen. There are movements that are looking for their rights. You're also seeing that in other states, these ethnic and religious issues are being addressed with extreme inequity and oppressive responses by overall states. We are seeing that happening in Iran, which annexed external territories, in China, which is also multicultural, multi-ethnic state that no one wants to acknowledge. So on the one hand, there seems to be a natural human inclination to self-isolate from those who are different and prioritize ethnic and cultural differences over civil norms. And unfortunately, we're even seeing that sort of polarization and identity politics taking place in the US, where there's actually an extreme legal level of protection for individual and rights of cultures and religions. But In other states, they don't have those protections. But on the other hand, the splintering, I'm not sure that it will resolve these differences, will prevent fighting, exploitation. It may only create even weaker states that are even less viable economically, and where people will find new reasons to fight internally within the governing groups. So I'm not sure what the answer is, but it's clear that without addressing sectarian issues on some level, whether as a nation state or multiple nation states, they will none of those entities will succeed. That to me sounds like the priority is to address these underlying extremely polarizing, dehumanizing differences and find a way to create orderly legal processes and political processes for resolving disputes that can overcome these cultural divides. And I'd like to turn to Dr. Manal now for her final comments, with respect to my question about these things or anything else that was said by the other speakers as well.
Thank you so much, Irina, for your comment. I believe that, as you said, there are so many countries which suffer from this division. Within the same country, we find so many different ethnicities, religious group, etc. And as I agree with Lailuma that it is the federalism is the best way to solve these problems. But I would like to add something, is that if you see all these conflicts wherever you go in the Middle East, for instance, or in South Asia, you have the Kashmir, you have Lebanon, you have the Kurds, in Iraq, even in Europe, in every country, we have to rely on the, let's say, the consciousness and the awareness of people. People should be educated to respect the other, to respect the different people, to respect the other culture. Unfortunately, the reason why these extremist regimes are in power is that there is a lack of education. We don't educate people to respect the other, to accept the other as it is, even though if he or she is different ethnically speaking or religiously or culturally whatsoever. This is a big issue. And asking people to go to the polls and to vote without any culture of democracy, any culture of, any political, let's say, initiation. Even here in Europe, we have this problem. When you ask young people to vote, sometimes they don't know what voting is, and they go and vote for extremist groups. So this is a problem. We have to teach people their rights. The right to vote is something very important, and they need to understand what voting is. We have seen so many people in so many countries in the Middle East voting for the Islamists. And when you ask them, they say no, they are moderate and progressive and whatsoever, and they are and on the contrary, they are going backward, and they are losing their rights and freedoms and civil liberties. Why? Because these people, they are lacking the basic education regarding their civil rights, regarding the political consciousness being initiated to their civil rights, how to vote, etc. So that's a big mistake that intellectuals, academia, media, these people make, is that giving the fate of a whole country to sometimes people who are not educated. They are going to vote for these people, and then you say, why do these people go to power? Is that because, or get power, is that because they focus on these uneducated people, and they let's say they have a narrative to seduce them, to give, they promise them jobs, or they promise them money whatsoever, and then they win the elections. But after 5 or 10 years, people discover that these extremist parties, or these let's say religious parties, are not giving them anything. So first of all, is secularism is very important, separating the religious from the political, as Lailuma said. This is very, very important. And the second thing is teaching people what is really voting. How do you go to the poll and to vote, and also respecting religious diversity, respecting ethnicity, respecting everything, and of course, after that we can talk about referendum and we can talk about federalism. But at this stage, I believe that it's a good it's a promising project, but we need to work on it for the coming years or for the coming generations. We hope one day we find peace in Kashmir and in Bangladesh and in the Middle East and in Afghanistan, and everywhere in the world. But we need to work on that. And this starts with education and with raising awareness about differences and about the respect of the other culture. Thank you.
I agree with that. The only problem is the institutions that we see, the NDI and the Republican Institute that functioned all over the world and who are supposed to be doing that. These institutions have been hijacked by ideologues pushing their own agenda and exploiting these democratic processes to push things. We saw how in Egypt, for instance, during the Arab Spring, the secular democratic forces were actually did not receive the same amount of backing from these groups who backed old pro-Islamist, pro-Mubarak groups who were actually in cahoots with some of the Islamists and these Islamist groups who ultimately came to power. They did not use their power that they had to back the types of people who wanted to bring the country out of that morass and into a different direction. So as a result, people have lost confidence in the democratic processes because when they're manipulated by external agendas, they inevitably lead to undemocratic results. So almost, when President Sisi came to power, too many Egyptians, that was more legitimate process, more representative and better for the country than a so-called voting process that was not interfered with externally and that was manipulated with and that was not clear or transparent. So unfortunately, the democratic process is only as good as the people backing it, the people who are training these people. And I'm not sure, having seen the events for the past 10 years since the Arab Spring, I'm not sure that we have those institutions in place in the West to deal with that they are not being hijacked by extremist or corrupt groups for their own reasons. And I'm not sure who is in the best position to talk about democracy right now, not because I don't believe in the concept of empowering educated individuals to make informed choices of their leadership and institutions in the country, but because the people who are supposed to be the best representatives have themselves fallen into the trap of going into undemocratic or extremely sectarian corrupt routes. And I think the West needs to solve these problems internally first before being in a position to assist others or being credible on that issue in my view right now.
I do agree with you. Yeah. Yes, indeed.
I'd like to thank everybody so much for coming, for speaking on these issues. It was a very interesting, thought-provoking conversation. I'll be sharing the full recording later and also excerpts for you to distribute on social media with people's comments. Please, I'd like to welcome you to the Washington Outsider, and please, I'd like to hear from you. We welcome articles to the website, and I'd like to hear your own words in those articles. We have a lot of, there's a lot of academic studies, but there's not a lot of actual voices providing their own insights on what's going on, and a lot of these studies are misused by the media to create, to create a distance from the public and the actual people who are affected by this situation. I'd like to hear more directly from people in the articles, and I'd like to hear from you being quoted in articles by Manal or writing your own op-eds, and hopefully also coming back in future programs as well. And thank you so much to everyone once again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This was the Washington Outsider, and we always welcome new insights, new voices, and new perspectives that are being ignored, dismissed, or shut down by the mainstream media and by societies where they come from. Thank you so much, and I hope to be back with you soon.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for
Bye-bye.
the invitation. Bye.